Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Gurudev. Welcome to all. On the instructions of Gurudev and with his mercy, we continue our reading of Caitanya Caritamrta, Adi Lila, Chapter 4, by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, in the translation by and with the commentary by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We've read now 34 verses of chapter 4, and started to clarify the meaning of the appearance of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Adi Lila is entitled, as far as I know, titled by Prabhupada himself. It's not in the original version, but titled The Confidential Reasons for the Appearance of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, which is a very good title because it concerns the internal spiritual reasons for his appearance. What kind of internal ambitions, what kind of spiritual wishes and desires led him, and even we can say inspired him to the genius, to the divine genius of seeking to appear in the special form that he did appear in. Chapter 4, you remember, follows chapter 3, which Prabhupada named the external reasons for the appearance. This is the reasons as they relate to devotees, to other souls in the world, to the situation outside of him, beyond him. And as we've already seen several times, these two reasons tend to come together. So the way that he sees his devotees is very much connected to the way that he understands himself. And this is really part of the miracle of Caitanya, the beauty of his heart, the generosity of his soul and his mercy, that he sees his own experience as a devotee as the same, essentially the same as his external devotee's experience of him. So in the very first moments of this chapter, we already discovered that he takes the position, the mood, and the point of view of a devotee, and in doing so, he puts himself on equal standing with all the devotees of the world. So there's already a very strong connection between this chapter 4, the internal reasons, the confidential reasons, and chapter 3, the external reasons. I described often, and maybe I'll continue to describe this chapter 4 as a kind of crossroads between what I call the Navadvip Lila, the Lila of his early life, and the Vraj Lila, the Lila of his later life. The Navadvip Lila is mostly, but not completely, in external consciousness, where he's on the path to discovering himself as Krishna, and all the while evolving as the perfect devotee of Krishna, what our Gurudev has called two souls in one body. So the soul of Krishna and the soul of a devotee in one body. And then the crossover is to something we can call the Vraj Lila, from around his midlife, around 24, when his internal consciousness becomes almost overpowering. And his secret love of Raj emerges, his experience of the Vrindavan forest pastimes become more and more real, and his spiritual consciousness becomes the center of his life. And this is what Gurudev has called two bodies in one soul. So the soul of Caitanya Mahaprabhu as the two bodies, Radha and Mohan, in the spiritual plane. Last time we read verse 34, which was a long verse. Well, rather, the verse was short, but the commentary by Srila Prabhupada was quite long. Verse 34 was actually a verse from Bhagavatam, from the 10th canto, and we divided it into two parts. I'll repeat the verse for you for your memory in the translation. It goes like this: Krishna manifests his eternal human-like form and performs pastimes to show mercy to the devotees. Having heard such pastimes, one should engage in service to him. So you remember there were two quite different parts to the verse. The one says simply that Krishna took a human form and carried out his pastimes as an expression of mercy to his devotees, as a gift to his devotees, to show, among many things, to show that he is a devotee of Krishna like the other regular devotees. So this was one of the moments I mentioned where the internal reasons for the appearance becomes connected to the external reason. This was an external reason, but with an internal motivation. He wanted to show the external devotees what devotion is. And that devotion is internal for him. So that let us talk about, together with Prabhupada, the idea of external and internal. But also we meditated on this lesson from Gurudev about two souls in one body. And then finally we meditated on the idea of mercy, what it means that Mahaprabhu's appearance is merciful. And we, among other things, concluded that it was merciful because it was a form of him opening his heart and surrendering himself to Krishna as a devotee. So like any devotee, he became a devotee by surrendering, by giving up material connections and material coverings, and by living from his soul. So in this way, by this appearance, he becomes a perfect example of a perfect devotee, while miraculously at the same time being God himself. That was the first part of the verse, where it just said that he appeared as a form of mercy. But then the second part of the verse last time, and we'll go into this in detail now in the next verse, was different. The second part of the verse was this: having heard such pastimes, one should engage in service to him. But this is a message to us. It's saying, look, when you hear about these things that he does, you should also become a devotee. You should also establish a relationship of devotion to him, of service, of love. When you see these things, you too should become a devotee of Caitanya. So what was important in the second part was the should. It's kind of a command. So now we need to talk about, we talked a little bit last time, but we need to talk more today about what this command means. You should become a devotee. And you should be inspired by what you see in the pastimes of Lord Caitanya to let yourself become a devotee. There were maybe two more points that we can remember that came from Srila Prabhupada's commentary, both of which I found very moving. The one was that, I quote, this is the commentary itself: in the spiritual world, all existence is unadulterated goodness. This is what Prabhupada commented to this verse. So human life itself, he said, Prabhupada said, is made for devotion. It's auspicious, it's favorable for devotion. And this gives us great hope and great faith that our task may be difficult, but we're already in a very, very good position to surrender and to become devotees. We don't need to create goodness. We don't need to go out and capture it from other places or other people. We need to revive it from ourselves, bring it back to life within ourselves. The goodness is our constitutional position. It's our svarup. And by clearing away the blockages to that svarup, we can rejoin this, what Prabhupada called unadulterated goodness, means pure, uncontaminated goodness. So today we continue with verse 35. It goes like this. Bhavat kriya vidalin se ihakae kartavya ashya ei anyata pratyavaya. And Prabhupada translates it this way. Here, the use of the verb bhavat, which is in the imperative mood, tells us that this certainly must be done. Non-compliance would be abandonment of duty. It's a strange verse because it's a grammar lesson. It's a lesson in the grammar of the verse before. And we could go over it quickly, but Prabhupada is actually very interested in this. And so he's going to comment on it at length. It's a commentary according to which Prabhupada explores the nature of language. And that's interesting for us. And he asks, what is language? What does it carry? What does it tell us? What does it demand of us? What does it require of us? And in this case, it's that second part of the verse, the last verse, which is going to be interesting. Because, like I said to you a moment ago, the second part says, I repeat it for you, having heard such pastimes, one should engage in service to him. And it's that should that's going to interest Prabhupada now. What does it mean that we should do something if we see the pastimes? Bhavat kriya, which essentially means the verb of future action, something will be in the future. This tells us that we need to do something, that something needs to be happening in the future. And then the verse says, if it doesn't happen, we will not have done our duty. So if we don't follow this verse, we will not have done our duty. We have not been done what we will not have done what we are supposed to do. So again, Krishnadas Kaviraj is giving us a kind of grammar lesson here. And it's about understanding the difference between spiritual consciousness and material consciousness. And about understanding the difference between spiritual language and material language. He's trying to tell us something about what happens in language. And we already know this is important for us because we often say things like, the name of God is non-different from God. You remember this rule. We hear it many times, very often. We're saying that when the name of God appears in language, then God is there. So language is doing something very special. We also say sometimes that Mahamantra contains the whole world. You might have heard this said before. That by embracing Radha and Mohan in the Mahamantra, everything in the universe is being said. So that language in the Mahamantra is recreating the world. These are very strange things to say for ordinary material consciousness. So Prabhupada wants us to understand these things. And mostly, he wants us to understand why, when we hear about the pastimes of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, we want to become devotees. We are changed by what we hear. We are transformed by what we hear. Nobody's telling us to do something. It's not a command directly, but we feel like we want to change anyway. We want to become devotees. We want to open our hearts. We want to let our feelings flow. And this is being caused by language, but indirectly. So the verse doesn't say you must let your feelings flow. The verse doesn't say you must be a devotee. But it does say that when you hear this, you will want to. It's a reminder that devotion is not a command. It cannot be commanded. Becoming a devotee is natural. It must be natural. It must be organic. It must come spontaneously. It must come from the self, without a cause, without any direct provocation, without any reason, without any logic. That's why we call it mercy. It has no cause. It's causeless. We become devotees just because we can become devotees. Otherwise, we would go to Amazon.com and click on devotee and pay our 25 euros and would become devotees like that. It cannot have a cause. It must come from mercy. And that's why we so often talk about the mercy of Guru, because the first level of that mercy is Guru mercy, Guru Kripa. That the Guru, by opening his heart, lets the feeling flow that opens our heart, and we then become inspired to become devotees. So it's a natural process. It's not caused by something. You cannot ask for it and get it. You can pray as much as you want, but your prayer will not be the cause. What you can do is prepare your heart for being opened by mercy. We can prepare ourselves, we can soften ourselves, we can form a relation to our own emotions, form a relation to our hearts, to our souls. We can very much prepare the path, but it can never be a cause. It can never be caused. This is sometimes why Prabhupada and others say that Vaidhi Bhakti is an acceptable path for those who have not arrived at spontaneous Raganuga Bhakti. So Vaidhi Bhakti, following customs and rules and regulations, can help us to prepare the heart so that when mercy arrives, our heart is soft and ready. So when Raganuga Bhakti appears, we will be ready. Harinam, there's Japanese if you prefer, but there's no other translation proposed today. This brings us back then to the question of language. Language carries in it energy. All you need to do is chant a bit and you feel the energy. All you need to do is sing a song in temple and you feel the energy. All you need to do is turn on your radio if you like, or your internet, and you feel energy flowing. So the poetry of language, the rhythm of language, the music of language passes along an energy which is related to our hearts, a spiritual energy. And if we open our spiritual ears to it, if we open our hearts to it, if we listen to it not as logical sentences, not as logical notes written by a computer, when we feel the music, it can take us away from our material, intellectual way of understanding words and bring us towards the softening of the heart. Sometimes we need help, but the end effect will be listening and hearing from the heart. And now Prabhupada, we can read his commentary, start to read his commentary. says something similar. He says the following: neophytes will be able to understand these affairs only after being elevated or by regulated devotional service under the expert guidance of the spiritual master. So by being directed to activities and to pastimes and to associations that can open and soften the heart. Neophytes, complete new beginners, need this. So this is why sometimes it's said that Vaidhi Bhakti can be a helpful path. But in the end, the goal is the same. So sometimes Gurudev jokingly says, well, the goal is the nose, and you can either decide to go directly to the nose or you can go the long way around the head to the nose and you'll find the same goal. If we use the mind, if we follow the rules, then the path is longer, but ultimately the goal will be the same. Prabhupada continues, then they too will be competent to hear of the love affairs of Radha and Krishna. So once we've become accustomed to softening our hearts, then we can hear and feel the soft and loving energy of the pastimes of Radha and Krishna beyond just the mechanical narrative stories of Radha and Krishna. So we read and we enjoy the pastimes because they move us. We read and enjoy them because we feel something, not because it's a theater play where it says Radha enters, Krishna moves left, Radha waves, and so on. It's not mechanical like this. It's in the poetry, it's in the imagination, it's in the what we call aesthetics, the beauty of the pastimes that we find our inspiration. And this is what Krishnadas is trying to get at with this verb, with this verse, that the language of what can happen when we observe the pastimes has an energy in it which inspires our hearts. Furthermore, Prabhupada links this idea of language to morality, to parakya bhav, things we've talked about before. Here's what he says. As long as one is in material, conditioned life, strict discipline is required in the matter of moral and immoral activities. So we hear the rules, which are material rules, rules in material consciousness. We hear the words, which are in material consciousness. And we think in terms of right and wrong, which is also in material consciousness. When we're following rules, we're in material consciousness. So parakya bhav has a material level. Parakya bhav in material consciousness means breaking rules for one reason or another. Breaking rules to be with a beloved. Breaking the rules of a matrimony, of being married, or breaking the rules of society, of being in a family. When we break these rules to follow our heart, we're breaking a material rule to go into our spiritual feelings. So parakya bhav, we talked about it before, is in a place between the material rules and the spiritual rules. There's no morality in spiritual world. There's no right and wrong. There's no judgment like this. So one way of understanding parakya bhav is that the gopis, when they leave their husbands, breaking the material rules, they're doing it to find perfection in their spiritual consciousness. So they're liberating themselves from the material rules in order to establish a loving relation with Krishna. And this happens through language, because the rules are stated in language, and these are material. They're in material consciousness. Prabhupada goes on and says, the absolute world is transcendental and free from such distinctions, because there, inebriety, remember that means drunkenness, is not possible. So there are no distinctions between right and wrong, good and bad. Everything in spiritual world is in the service of Radha and Mohan, the loving pastime of Radha and Mohan. So, Prabhupada continues, in this material world, a sexual appetite necessitates distinction between moral and immoral conduct. So the fact that we have material desires like sexual desires means that we need to have something to govern them. So we have to have good and bad to organize the society into what we do and what we do not do, so that there can be social order and good functioning. But this is all material language, and it cannot have any spiritual meaning. And that's why also in spiritual plane there is no sexual appetite. In spiritual world, desire is purely spiritual. Desire is from one soul to the other soul. There's no kind of material activity that can be exhausted. There's no before a sexual act and after a sexual act, before which is full of desire and after which is full of bitterness. None of this, because everything at every moment is flowing into the fulfillment of the spiritual connection, the spiritual connection from one soul to the next, and in the highest form from the soul of Radha to the soul of Mohan. Only material realities cause material desires, and only material realities cause material suffering. I love peanut butter, a material thing that gives pleasure to my material senses, and in material words I can say to the world, I want some peanut butter. And when I've eaten my peanut butter, then my suffering begins, and I think about the next material desire that I can look for, fulfilling. But all this happens in material consciousness, and it happens through material language. I say peanut butter, and then the shopkeeper brings me peanut butter. Material language brings us material things, but it cannot bring us spiritual things, at least not directly. The one great example, the most important example, is the material words, I love you. I love you. No matter how much we utter these beautiful words, materially beautiful words, no matter how many romance novels and romance poems we read, and no matter how many Hollywood romance films we see with our favorite movie stars, these words will never complete the love that I am capable of feeling for you. In fact, it's the contrary. The fact that I stand before you and say, I love you, is the testimony of the failure of material language. If I say, I love you, it means I don't love you. Or it means I don't love you completely. Because if I have to use these poor, silly material words to say it, then I've failed at loving you in my heart. Spiritual love does not need to be said, and that's a good thing because it cannot be said. Yeah. Prabhupada goes on now with this theme of material pleasure and sexual activities, and says that there are no sexual activities in the spiritual world. I already commented, but we can ask again, why does he say this? What does that mean? Well, from a point of view that's similar to what I just said about love, the material sexual act is a promise of future pleasure. If you're doing sex now, it's because there's some promise of something greater in the future. Maybe minutes away, maybe hours away, maybe a lifetime away. But it's a way of saying the union I want with you, the spiritual loving union I want with you, I cannot have, and therefore will do this to get very close, but with the same admission that we fail. We cannot give full pleasure to our beloved through the sexual act. Sexual union is the promise of a fulfillment in the future, and as we all know, it's the promise of a disappointment in the future. Because no matter how long it goes on, it stops sometime. And when it stops, there's emptiness, there's longing again, there's even suffering or bitterness. Material pleasure of all kinds, from peanut butter to sex, is the signal that that pleasure will end. It's always ending. We can always start it again, hoping that it will last longer. We can buy a bigger box of peanut butter, but that box too will be emptied, just like the pleasure of an intimate relation will be stopping. And there's only one kind of relation that never stops, indeed only grows, and that's the relation between me in my spiritual form and you in your spiritual form. The perfect presence of the soul to the soul, the perfect communication between me and my Svarup, me being myself, and you and your Svarup, you being your Svarup. What is Svarup? What does Svarup mean? Svarup, literally, Rupa, you know, means form, and Sva means self, my own. So Svarup means my form, what I am, who I am, when I'm being completely myself. That is Svarup. And we know that what I am, who I am, when I'm being completely myself, is my soul. So all we can do in material language is to argue. And we do a lot of that, don't we? We can argue about what can be and what cannot be, what should be and what should not be, what we might do and might not do. Spiritual language is a discussion about what we are, who we are, when we're being ourselves. So this brings Prabhupada to say, the transaction between lover and beloved in the spiritual world, these are pure transcendental love and unadulterated bliss. So perfect bliss. One who has not been attracted by the transcendental beauty of Ras will certainly be dragged down into material action. Thus, to act in material contamination and to progress to the darkest region of hellish life. Very dramatic language from Prabhupada, but the message is clear. When we have the flavor of transcendental ras, pleasure or love, on our tongue, it lifts us. It inspires us to go higher. It inspires us to become purer. It inspires us to become closer to our soul, to become more ourselves. So if we have just a taste of this, only one atom, one drop of nectar on our spiritual tongue, a little idea, a little inspiration, then this will lift us higher and lift us into our own Svarup. And when we taste that, we must use all our material capacity, our mental functions to focus on that and make it larger. Prabhupada again. But by understanding the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna, one is freed from the grip of attraction to material so-called love between man and woman. When we know the pastimes of Radha and Mohan, we know that there's something greater and deeper and higher than our material love. The key word in the comments by Prabhupada is understanding. What does that mean? By understanding the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna. This means realizing, feeling it, observing it from the point of view of our Svarup, observing it through association with other devotees. It can only be understood and observed and realized from the point of view of the pure soul. So this needs to be our goal. We can always observe a tiny drop of it when we discuss with devotees, when we discuss with Guru, when we discuss pastimes. And this tiny drop of understanding can like I said before, help us to grow and lift us higher. But fully realizing it requires full soul realization. Prabhupada then continues and says, similarly, one who understands the pure parental love of Nanda and Yashoda for Krishna will be saved from being dragged into material parental affection. So it's very nice. Now, Prabhupada will go through the different levels of bhav, so the 5 different levels of bhav, and say, if you understand, for example, conjugal love, Madhurya Bhav, to the love of Radha and Mohan, then this will lift you away from the material love of man and woman. And now he says, well, if you understand a drop of the transcendental love, parental love, for example, of Nanda and Yashoda, Vatsalya Bhav, then this will lift us from the material constraints of our parental love in material life. And then he goes on to talk about friendship. He says, if one accepts Krishna as the supreme friend, the attraction of material friendship will be finished for him, and he will not be dismayed, means confused, by so-called friendship with mundane wranglers. So here he's talking about Sakya Bhav. The more we taste and get an understanding of Sakya Bhav, the mood of friendship, the more we can transcend our material friendships. And then he goes on to talk about Dasya Bhav. He says, if he is attracted by servitorship, by service to Krishna, he will no longer have to serve the material body in the degraded status of material existence, with the false hope of becoming master in the future. Once again, the more we have a taste for service to Krishna, or for service to Guru, service to essentially anyone, the more we can transcend the way that we are required to serve our material aims in life.
Sorry, Uddhava.
No, sorry, needed.
Radhe. But in Love Kusumanjali, it is always pointed out the importance of the friendship between Rupa Goswami and
Raghunath.
No. So, and a friend is someone who remembers me.
Yeah, no, it's a very nice point. They are friends in material life. At the same time, so I don't say no, but I can nuance and say, Rupa is the guru of Raghunath. They are both deep in Manjari Bhav, in their spiritual forms. So in some ways they're both having this experience of pure, uncontaminated friendship, which lifts them above the material friendship. So I would say they have both, right? But as their lives go on and they deepen their practice, their spiritual friendship, I think, is far more important. But you have an interesting point, very good point. There's no doubt that both Rupa and Raghunath have found their place after their disappearance. They have found their place in the spiritual world. And now they're in only uncontaminated, both friendship and I suppose still Dasya Bhav. But maybe for some time in their material existence they were doing, as you said, being loyal material friends to each other. Now we're just about finished this meditation on the language, and Prabhupada says, if one is not attracted by the transcendental nature of Krishna, one is sure to be attracted to material enjoyment. So if we're not finding this drop of ras that's leading us, lifting us to a transcendental relation, then we're being pulled downward to the material enjoyment. And we're all of us, everyone here in this meeting is to some degree stuck in that. But everyone who's here is having a little experience of the transcendental nature of Krishna and being inspired and pulled in the direction of purifying and finding the spiritual nature of our souls. Thus, he says, Prabhupada says, to become involved in the clinging network of virtuous and sinful activities, and to continue material existence by transmigrating from one material body to another. So if you're going to spend your time arguing in material terms what is good and bad and right and wrong, who's a good devotee, who's a bad devotee, what's the best way to serve the soup and what's the wrong way to serve the soup, then you're certainly going to spend many more lifetimes reappearing in a material body. Whereas if we follow the taste of transcendental flavor, then we have the chance to grow, come closer to our souls, and end the cycle of reincarnation. It's a final reminder for this verse that all these material issues, the arguments, the rights and wrongs, these are all material qualities that bring us down, that cover us, that block us from being ourselves. Any impulse that you have to say to another, you are wrong, is not only arrogant, but it's also blocking more or less your understanding of what the spiritual common ground you have with the person or persons you're speaking to. Finally, Prabhupada says only in Krishna consciousness can one achieve the highest perfection of life. That completes the commentary on verse 35. Now we have this long commentary. Now we have 3 or 4 verses where there's absolutely no commentary by Prabhupada, but we'll try to explain the verses anyway. Verses 36 and 37 are put together. Ei vancha yacha Krishna prakatiya karana Ashuras hamara anushanga prayojana Ei mata Caitanya Krishna Purna Bhagavan Yuga Dharma Pravartana Nahatan Rakama. Prabhupada translates as follows: just as these desires are the fundamental reason for Krishna's appearance, whereas destroying the demons is only an incidental necessity, so for Sri Krishna Caitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, promulgating the Dharma of the age is incidental. Just as these desires, and here we're talking about the confidential desires, the internal, spiritual desires for appearance. Just as these are the main reasons for Krishna appearing and not to kill the demons, that wasn't the reason. In the same way, for Caitanya, the main reason is internal or spiritual, and it's not to promote the Dharma of the age. So just as Krishna appeared in other appearances for spiritual reasons and not to kill the demons, although he did kill the demons, or had the demons killed, as Gurudev reminds us, by other avatars, in the same way, Caitanya came for internal reasons and not in order to continue the religion of the time. So it's a way of saying that Krishna in earlier incarnations and Caitanya in this incarnation, they came for the spiritual internal reasons and not to do the mechanical, regulated things that we associate with them. Those things are secondary. It's true that the demons were killed, and it's true that Caitanya advanced the religious culture of his time, but these were not the main point. That's what this verse is saying to us. The Dharma is a translation of Yuga Dharma. So the religious duties of our time, the Yuga Dharma, these are external to Caitanya. These are not part of his internal confidential reasons. So he's less interested in these external cultural, even religious cultural questions than he is with realizing his inner desire to become a devotee of God. It's Caitanya's intuition and not the external religion of his time which inspires him to make his appearance. He wants to come to spread prema bhakti. This will have an influence on the religious culture, but that's not his aim. That's secondary, as it says in the verse. He wants to show something about himself, about the nature of love, and about the connection that he naturally has with his devotees, the devotional connection. He wants to show that all devotees are part of the same exchange of feeling, part of the same exchange of love. He wants to show that experiencing love from our souls is the same as Caitanya experiencing love from his soul. That our connection with devotional service is the same as Caitanya's connection with devotional service. Yes, there were some demons killed. This was just secondary problem. Yes, there was the Vaishnavism was promoted by Caitanya in a certain way. Yes, but this is a secondary question. That's what this verse is trying to tell us. Promoting Dharma, or if you like, arguing in Dharma, resisting Dharma, all these relations to Dharma block us from our devotional relation to God. The important thing is not Dharma, the important thing is our relation to the divine, our devotional relation. And in the first part of Caitanya's life, he shows this by being a devotee to Krishna. And in the second part of his life, he shows this by spreading the realization about the devotional relation between Radha and Mohan. So it's this desire to show and to share which is the cause of his appearance, and not to follow the religion of our time. Verse 38. Kona karana yabe haila avatara mana, yuga dharma kala hela se kale milana. Prabhupada translates. When the Lord desired to appear for another reason, this time for promulgating the religion of the age also arose. Saying essentially the same thing as the last verse in a different way. When the Lord desired to appear for another reason, and we know that reason is to promote, to spread prema bhakti, the time for promulgating, for advancing the religion of the age also arose. That's not why he came to advance Vaishnavism. He came to advance prema bhakti. But Vaishnavism was advanced anyway. The more, you could say, direct, literal translation of the second part, Yuga Dharma Kala Hela Sela Kale Malana, would be something like the time of religion corresponds to the time of his appearance. Yuga Dharma Kala, the time of his religious appearance. Hela corresponds to the time of, corresponds, Milana, to our time. Sekala. So what he does automatically conforms to what happens in the world. But the most important thing about what he does is to share prema bhakti. Verse 39. Dui hetu avatari lana bhakta gana apana asvade prema nama sankirtana. Prabhupada translates, thus, with two intentions, the Lord appeared with his devotees and tasted the nectar of prema with the congregational chanting of the holy name. So I think this is quite clear. He had two intentions: to be a devotee, appearing with his devotees, and to spread the congregational chanting of the holy name. Nama Sankirtana. Verse 40. Sei dvara achandale kirtana sanchare nama prema mala ganti pare la samsare. Thus he spreads kirtan even among the untouchables. He wove a wreath of the holy name and prema, nama prema mala, with which he garlanded the entire material world. Very sweet verse. Thus he spread kirtana even among the untouchables. He wove a wreath of the holy name and prem with which he garlanded the entire material world. He made a garland out of the holy name and prem. Those are the two materials that he made the garland out of. And he put it around the neck of the whole world. There were no distinctions. Prema Bhakti is given to everyone because he reveals that in spiritual world there is no distinction between souls. This is a material, artificial construction. The distinction between material beings. On the spiritual level, there are no untouchables. There are no distinctions. So by showing that he is a simple devotee, and that every devotee can do Sankirtan, he's showing that everyone is equal in the spiritual plane. Verse 41. And now this is a short verse, which Prabhupada is very interested in, and so there'll be a long commentary. Eya mati bhakta bhava kari angirkara apaniya chari bhakti kari la prachara. In this way, assuming the sentiment of a devotee, he preached devotional service while practicing it himself. Absolutely a revolution in spiritual life. He doesn't appear as a great God and then make commands and preach like a great God or even like a great preacher. He assumes the sentiment of a devotee, the feeling, the mood of a devotee. And in his early life, he is completely dedicated as a devotee to Krishna. Humble, lowly, quiet. And from that position, from that mood, he preaches devotional service. That is, the message is, that's the only position from which devotional service can be preached, by being a devotee. This is the miracle of Mahaprabhu. It's not a God, I already said it, I'm sorry, I repeat myself, it's not a God who comes down and throws thunderbolts and makes everyone afraid and shouts loudly that this is the truth. He comes down and shows what a devotee is, and in that way he preaches. He preaches by showing. He preaches by showing what service is. Now, Srila Prabhupada talks about the relation between Rupa Goswami and Caitanya Mahaprabhu. When Rupa Goswami met Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu at Prayaga, Allahabad, he offered his respectful obeisances by submitting that Lord Caitanya was more magnanimous, more generous than any other avatar of Krishna, because he was distributing love of Krishna. So Sri Rupa Goswami is the one, according to Prabhupada, who says that he's more generous than any other avatar of Krishna. He's the only avatar who came with the sole purpose of distributing Prem Bhakti, of distributing love. No instructions, no requirements, no rules, no laws, no force, no power. Prabhupada continues now, he says, his mission, Mahaprabhu's mission, was to enhance love of Godhead, to increase love of Godhead, to make people love God more. That was the job. It wasn't to make them fear God, it wasn't to make them obey God, it was to make him increase their love for God. And what happens when the love for God is increased? Then the pleasure of God is increased, and the mercy that showers on devotees is increased. And how did he do this, Mahaprabhu? How did he enhance the love of Godhead? Well, by opening his heart and serving God. In the first half of his life, he was a very devout devotee, an humble devotee. He opened the door to his heart. He opened his door to show what service of God is. And this, even in its early stage, is a form of Manjari Bhav, showing that the highest form of relation to God is serving the love of God. The highest human experience is love, and love of God is the highest of that love. And our direct link to that love of God is by direct service to the love of God, which is called Manjari Bhav. Now, Prabhupada continues, in the human form of life, the highest achievement is to attain the platform of love of Godhead. That attainment is not to be love, but to serve love. Now here's a hidden clue, which will become explicit in a moment. The highest level of love for God is Caitanya Mahaprabhu and the love of Radha for Mohan. And for us, the attainment of that love, the highest level we can reach, is not to be it, because God the lover, Radha, and God the beloved or enjoyer, Krishna, we will never be that. We are not God. But the highest level is to serve that love. And that is what the Manjari task is. That's what Manjari Bhav consists of. Again, Prabhupada, that attainment is not to be love, but to serve love. So service is the highest form of our practice as bhaktas. Prabhupada says directly here. And now Prabhupada is going to go back to this matter of dharma, of the system of religion, the culture of religion, and remind us that Lord Caitanya does not come to invent or to advance a system of religion. He comes to advance devotion. Prabhupada says, religious systems are meant to show the existence of God, who is then generally approached as the cosmic order supplier. Religious systems are meant to show the existence of God, which is then generally approached as the cosmic order supplier. So I had to laugh because, of course, I'm sure Gurudev has heard this or read this at some stage, but it's the perfect way of expressing Amazon spirituality. The order Amazon, buy, sell, click, and receive. It's already here in Prabhupada's commentary to Chaitanya Caritamrta. Religious systems, and this is really a burning, very violent criticism from Prabhupada. Religious systems have one function, and that's to show that God exists. So we say, look, here are the rules, here's the book, here's the practice, here's the church. Can't you see now that God exists? They're used to be a proof of God. And then that proof can be used to say, well, all you have to do is click and you can receive your mercy. the Amazon model. We call this in English language self-fulfilling. If you first accept that church is caused by God, then you can use it as a proof of the existence of God. You don't believe in God, but you believe in the system. You don't believe in God, but you believe in the rules. Or if you like, the rules themselves are God. And by following the rules, then you're following God. That is because in religion, and in most forms of Dharma, there's not a difference between what God is supposed to be and what the rules are. So this idea Prabhupada is very critical of, and of course Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is completely against this kind of idea. In bhakti, spirituality is about devotion, about relation to God, and about loving relation to God. And if you wanted some kind of proof, we're not really interested in proofs, but if you wanted some kind of simple proof, you could just say, look, God, in my mind, I can separate God from just about everything. I can separate him from the book, from the Bible, or whatever you like, the Quran. I can separate him from the church. I can separate it from these wise men in the church council, or whatever you like. I can separate it from all those things. But what I can never separate God from is feeling. Feelings are always divine. Books are sometimes not divine. Churches are not divine sometimes, but feelings are always divine. They always come from the soul and go to the soul. They're always felt by the soul. They're always sent from the soul. They're always delivered to the soul. Feelings are always the spiritual language, to talk about language again, they're always the spiritual language of the soul to the soul. So Prabhupada now continues and says, but Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's transcendental mission is to distribute love of Godhead to everyone. So Chaitanya does not want to be this kind of God. He does not see himself as a kind of God. He doesn't want to be the boss God. He doesn't want to be the controller. He is there to give Manjari Bhav, to give devotional service to love. He's not going to sell you love. He's going to teach you about how to do service to love in Manjari Bhav. Prabhupada goes on, anyone who accepts God as the Supreme can take to the process of chanting Hare Krishna and become a lover of God. Anyone can become a lover of God. So we get, through Chaitanya, we get access to this loving relation with God and to godliness, which is love. Prabhupada again says, therefore Lord Chaitanya is the most magnanimous, the most generous. This comes from the verse. The munificent broadcasting, the generous and universal broadcasting of devotional service is possible only for Krishna himself. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. Let's not be mistaken. Everyone can transmit devotional service, but there's only one who can transmit it to everyone, and that is Krishna. And that is why Chaitanya appears as Krishna. The key to this is surrender, and now we're coming to slowly to the conclusion here. Prabhupada says, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has taught about... No, I lost my light. There we go. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has taught the philosophy of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you remember from Bhagavad Gita, we can read this many places. The most famous one is in the very end, chapter 18, and verse 66. Let's see, I think there it is, where Krishna says, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So Krishna is teaching surrender. Prabhupada again one who has surrendered to the Supreme can make further progress by learning to love him. So first we surrender, and then we love, he says. I think in my realization they happen at the same time. But we respect Prabhupada in this sense. I think that once we surrender, we have learned everything about love, which is because love and surrender go together. Surrender is in a way the realization of love of God. In any case, surrender means there's nothing more to learn. We have nothing to learn. We're just completely given over to our soul. So it's the end of difference between the material world of things to learn and the spiritual world of being in complete unity with ourselves. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement propagated by Lord Caitanya is especially meant for those who are cognizant of the presence of the Supreme Godhead, the ultimate controller of everything. So it's very nice, Prabhupada says here that it's actually Caitanya who is the one who's spreading Krishna consciousness, and not Prabhupada himself. It's Caitanya who is the propagator of Krishna consciousness. And those who are successful in that are the ones who are aware of the presence of the Supreme Godhead. And by Supreme Godhead we mean Bhagavan, and by Bhagavan we mean personality. That is to say, a God we can have a relation to, that we can have a loving, devotional relation to. Not an external controller, not a God like Narayan, not a God like Brahman, not even a God like Paramatma, but a God who we have an internal, personal relationship to, based on internal energy, based on loving energy. Prabhupada again, his mission, Chaitanya's mission, is to teach people how to dovetail themselves into engagements of transcendental loving service. So dovetail means putting two pieces of wood together so that the two parts become completely linked together. Like this. Sorry, my camera went off. We put two pieces of wood together and they become one. So we dovetail our activities with our soul. And now a remarkable comment about the depth of, let's say, Prabhupada's realization. He says, he, Caitanya, is Krishna teaching his own service from the position of a devotee. The Lord's acceptance of the role of devotee in the eternal form of Lord Caitanya is another of the Lord's wonderful features. Now, this is another one of our lessons. The humility of Mahaprabhu is his greatness. He shows his power by never being powerful. He shows the power of surrender. He shows that love is the greatest power. And he shows the power of Radharani in her love. And then, of course, we can always remember the third prayer of Shikshastakam about humility and humbleness. And remember that Caitanya is not at all about power. Prabhupada again, a conditioned soul cannot reach the absolute personality of Godhead by his imperfect endeavor. And therefore it is wonderful that Lord Sri Krishna, in the form of Lord Gauranga, has made it easy for everyone to approach him. Again, he doesn't appear as a big, scary God. He appears as someone we can have a relationship to, we can feel love for, and we can join together with. And all of it starts, as we learn in Shikshastakam, verse 3, with humility. Prabhupada continues, Svarup Damodar Goswami has described Lord Caitanya as Krishna himself, with the attitude of Radharani or a combination of Radha and Krishna. So it's almost strange hearing Prabhupada talking so openly about Radha and Krishna, because, of course, in his commentary to Bhagavatam and his commentary to Bhagavad Gita, he never talks about Radha. But here, he's very open about it. Svarup Damodar is one of the close associates of Caitanya in the later period, and also Manjari in the form of Vishaka, I think. Prabhupada continues, the intention of Lord Chaitanya is to taste Krishna's sweetness in transcendental love. He does not care to think of himself as Krishna because he wants the position of Radharani. He does not care to think of himself as Krishna because he wants the position of Radharani. He wants the mood. He doesn't want to be Radharani, he wants the position of Radharani. We should remember this, says Prabhupada. And so now Prabhupada points out to an interesting and important misunderstanding through the example of the Nadia Nagaris. And here he explains, he says, a class of so-called devotees called the Nadia Nagaris, or the Gauda Nagaris, pretend that they have the sentiment of the gopis toward Lord Chaitanya. But they do not realize that he placed himself not as the enjoyer, Krishna, but as the enjoyed, the devotee of Krishna. So the Nadia Nagaris, this is a group of female devotees from Navadvip in the time of Chaitanya. And they respect Krishna by taking the role of the gopis and trying to give him respect and veneration and pleasure. But they make the mistake of thinking that Krishna's pleasure stops there with the gopis. They think, according to Prabhupada, that Krishna's pleasure ends with Gopi Bhav. They don't understand that Krishna wants to enjoy in the mood of Radha. What does he want to enjoy? He wants to enjoy giving pleasure to Krishna. Something the gopis can do, but something that Krishna has never been able to do before Chaitanya. So they don't understand these Gauda Nagaris. They don't understand that Krishna wants to take three positions: as the enjoyed, as the enjoyer, and as the giver of love. Now we come to the end. I see I'm watching the clock, but I think we'll finish this commentary before we stop, even if we go a little bit over our time. Prabhupada continues, the concoctions of unauthorized persons, so the big mixture of unauthorized persons, pretending to be bona fide, have not been accepted by Lord Chaitanya. There are lots of people, lots of gurus out there that Lord Chaitanya does not accept. Presentations such as those of the Gauda Nagaris, the ones we just described, are only disturbance to the sincere execution of the mission of Lord Chaitanya, which is Manjari Bhav. So this confusion with Gopi Bhav gets in the way of the true message, which is Manjari Bhav. Prabhupada says, Lord Chaitanya is undoubtedly Krishna himself, and he is always non-different from Srimati Radharani. Lord Chaitanya is undoubtedly Krishna, and he is always non-different from Srimati Radharani. He never becomes Radha, but he takes her mood and takes shelter of her. Prabhupada continues, but the emotion technically called Vipralamba Bhav, which the Lord adopted for confidential reasons, should not be distributed in the name of service. Vipralamba Bhav is another form of love and separation, which we know as Viraha, but it's the love and separation of the gopis, the emotion of devotees towards Krishna and not of Radha. It's a different kind of love and separation than the viraha that we talk about sometimes. So this viraha must come, the love and separation must come from a spiritual awareness of the mood of Radha. Prabhupada again, a mundaner should not unnecessarily intrude into the affairs of transcendence and thereby displease the Lord. So if you're not going to attempt to associate with devotees, associate with Krishna from the place of your svarup, from your soul, then it's not interesting. Then you're just an interruption. Then you're a mundaner, one who's in mundane consciousness, worldly consciousness. One must always be on guard against this sort of devotional anomaly. If we want to have a relation with Krishna, we must do it from the soul. A devotee, says Prabhupada, is not meant to create disturbance to Krishna. And he continues, as Srila Rupa Goswami has explained, devotional service is anukuliyena, or favorable to Krishna. So only devotion that aids Krishna in his pursuit of Prem Bhakti is recommended. Prabhupada says, acting unfavorably toward Krishna is not devotion. And then he takes the example of Kamsa, which is quite interesting. He says, Kamsa was the enemy of Krishna. Kamsa was, of course, this dreadful king in Mathura who tried to kill Krishna at his birth, and finally he was defeated by Krishna. But for Krishna, that was never the point. Like we said in the beginning, Prabhupada says, Kamsa always thought of Krishna, but he thought of him as an enemy, not as a devotee, not as someone with respect. And one should always avoid such unfavorable so-called service. So in a way, Kamsa was a devotee of Krishna, but not a favorable one, not an auspicious one. Okay, now we're coming to the end, I promise. Prabhupada says, Lord Caitanya has accepted the role of Radharani. Lord Caitanya has accepted the role of Radharani. And we should support that position. This is Manjari Bhav. As Swarup Damodaras did in the Gambhira, the room where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed in Puri. He took the role, Damodar took the role of Manjari. He always reminded Lord Chaitanya of Radha's feelings of separation as they are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Lord Chaitanya appreciated his assistance. So Damodar is always there reminding him of Radha in Gambhira. But, he says Prabhupada, the Gaura Nagaris who place Lord Chaitanya in the position of enjoyer, so just the object of the gopi feelings, and themselves as is enjoyed in the position of the gopis, these are not approved by Lord Chaitanya or by Lord Chaitanya's followers. This is the problem with the Gaura Nagaris. Is instead of being blessed, says Prabhupada, the foolish imitators are left completely apart. So what he's saying is that if we just imitating means we play the role of someone who's outside the role of devotion. We can imitate anyone, we humans, we're very good at that. But we can only have a role of devotion when we stop imitating and start living from our souls. Now finally, Prabhupada says, their concoctions, these imitators, their concoctions are against the principles of Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. The doctrine of transcendental enjoyment by Krishna cannot be mixed up with the doctrine of transcendental feeling of separation from Krishna in the role of Radharani. To put it differently, transcendental enjoyment is symbolized by the gopis. We see that Krishna enjoys us, but he's not enjoying from the position of Radharani. And that's what Manjari Bhav is seeking. So the position of the gopis in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 10th canto is Gopi Bhav. And we are interested in helping Krishna to enjoy from the position of Radharani, and that is Manjari Bhav. Krishna is in the role, we want Krishna in the role of loving Krishna, in the role of Radharani giving love to Krishna. Giving love, giving pleasure, letting the eternal energy of pleasure flow. So Manjari Bhav is not the mood of loving Krishna, not the mood of giving pleasure to Krishna. It's the mood of supporting Radha, Krishna in the role, in the mood of Radha, in giving that love. It's the mood of waiting, watching, being helpful when needed. Manjari Bhav, it's the mood of preparing, knowing, understanding love, how it flows, how it operates. Manjari Bhav is the mood of understanding expertly what Radha needs and wants in order to meet Mohan. Manjari Bhav is the mood of understanding the heart. Manjaris are experts at understanding the hearts. And by heart we mean that Manjari knows what it is to be in the Svarup, to live from the Svarup. Because the content of our heart is, the content of our Svarup is the raw material for the happiness of God. Manjari Bhav means opening the resource of the heart, kind of like a mine, like a gold mine. Opening the different corners of our feelings, scraping away and digging into that mine of pure emotions, liberating those emotions, sharing the treasure of our hearts, sharing the surrender, and thereby increasing the pleasure. By liberating what's in our hearts, we do service to Radha. We do service to her desire to adore and love Mohan. We do service to Krishna by doing service to Radha and to everyone else who's in aspiring to Manjari Bhav. So bhajan means researching the heart. Gurudev says we must research the feelings. We're all like miners in gold mines of the heart, workers in the mines of feeling, digging deeper and scraping away and deeper. But unlike miners, gold miners, we don't need to carry the gold to the surface in our arms, the heavy gold. Once it's uncovered from the mine of our hearts, then it automatically and spontaneously becomes Radha's gold. Thank you for your patience. I'm a little bit late today. But that concludes the commentary for verse... what was it?
Thank you so much, Uddhava. It was very revelation, this verse and this commentary. I don't know if you have 1 minute more, if I can.
I have a lifetime, my dear. I just hope I haven't fatigued our other devotees. Please go ahead.
I had these emotions when he said that Caitanya Mahaprabhu accepted the role of the devotee. In this sentence is his internal and his external also motivation why is here. For the devotee who can see only external, they accept that he is devotee and that they must also to become devotee. But for external is obviously that he is Manjari. This devotee means Manjari.
Exactly.
And actually, in external purpose not exist only internal, but only to catch us when we are in the low position, material position. For us is something like external, no? But actually when one become raga bhakti means actually internal, to be internal.
Yes.
Even this external become internal. So nothing exists but external. And many devotees, they can see also Prabhupada like being engaged in the external mission. But actually he was in the external mission from the beginning to the end. It's just upon us to see who is here. And it is very amazing that somehow or another, by mercy of Gurudev, everything is revealed now, slowly, from the same purpose of Prabhupada. But you see, we need the Guru who can show us. We must have some example, otherwise it will not awaken us. Actually, we are external, I want to say internal beginning. Yes. But we cannot see that we are internal. But when we meet one person who is situated in the internal, suddenly our soul also recognize that we can also be internal, and we start to follow this path.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much.
Wonderful. That's so. I hope it's clear to everyone what Dainidhi says. It's a beautiful realization that, and you know, that someone who's in a realized soul sees any soul as only spiritual. A realized soul sees plants and trees as purely spiritual. So it's not just from the point of view of Mahaprabhu that he's internal or external. It's also from the point of view of the souls, the devotees around him, to what degree he's internal or external. So I would say, I think what you were saying is partly that there's an internal motivation for him revealing himself, and then there's also an external activity. He's going around, he's in a material body, he's walking around India, he's preaching, he has a wife. Yeah? There's an external dimension. But if there were a perfect devotee with him, they would see only the divine. They wouldn't even see the external colorings. So this internal, external consciousness, it happens from two sides. From we who see and from the one who is seen. If we see only with spiritual eyes, we see only spiritual things. So it's not that we go out some door and suddenly we're in the... Oops, there went my power again. It's not that we go out some door... Let's see, yeah. It's not that we go out some door and we suddenly come to a spiritual place. It's that the material things around us become spiritualized. So for a perfect soul, they would see in my lamp all pure spirit, whereas I just see a lamp. This is part of the story of the interconnectedness of devotion as well. That my heart only grows thanks to your heart. My soul is only alive thanks to your heart. And so on and so forth. Wonderful. Vandana writes, thank you. When you say highest is the love of God, it actually means love for God. Absolutely, Vandana. It's one of the weaknesses of English language that love of God in English means love for God. In German, you would have two different expressions. It's the poverty of English. And I have to tell you also, Vandana, that I spent 5 years being confused just because of this problem. That prem means love of God in my mind, but it means actually love for God. And I thought it meant God's love for me, but it's our love for God. So it's a very good thing to remind the English or non-English speakers. Well, the English speakers too, I suppose. Thank you for your patience, dear ones. Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Shri Radhe. Ananda Prem Ki Jai. Thank you, my dear.